Fab. So everyone should be able to see my slides, hopefully. But it's lovely to be here. I'm really excited to chat about one of the things I'm most excited and passionate about in life, which is Pinterest. So I'm really excited to talk through and just to give you a kind of a how to get started, a bit of information about Pinterest if you're not familiar with it, how it kind of works, and some of the different ways that it can work for different kinds of businesses. So while I am doing a bit of an introduction, I'd love it if you can pop in the chat box A, B or C. So A, if you've heard a lot about Pinterest but you've never used it. B, if you already have a Pinterest account but only use it personally. Or C, if you have a Pinterest account and you've tried using it for your business but you're not really sure what you're doing. So while I do introductions, pop that in the chat and then I'll have a look and see where we're at with all of those. So I am Laura. My business is at wholeheartedly.com. I tend to work with people with coaching businesses, and really a lot of the work that I do is around helping people to set up a business that is really about helping them create kind of like the lifestyle that they want, where they're not working all of the hours God sends, so they can actually have a bit of a life and a bit of flexibility that comes with it. I offer one-to-one mentoring, I do design and coaching, and also have various online programs as well. And I'm a mum to 2 children. I've got a little boy called Finley, and a little girl who's just 1.5 called Freya. And my kind of background with Pinterest, when I first started using it, it was, I can't actually remember the year. It was when I was an early adopter, so it just started. It was like one of the, a bit like how Clubhouse has been recently, where you have to have like invites to get in. And I can remember starting it back then and just really falling in love with it. I've partnered with the Pinterest UK team in lots of different ways and done lots of work with Pinterest over the years. I've got 94,000 followers over there, and I've really used Pinterest as like being the main platform I've always used to help me grow my business. It's helped me grow my email list, and it's helped me make more sales of my courses and programs and get more clients. But the great thing about Pinterest is it can work for lots of different kinds of businesses. I'm going to try and talk a little bit about the different ways that you can use it depending on what your business is and what it is that you do. So I'm just going to have a quick look in the chat box. So we've got I think we've just got one A, B, we've got quite a few C's as well. Oh, quite a few C's. That's really interesting. So quite a few people who have got it but haven't really done much with it. So that's really interesting to know. And hopefully by the end of this, you'll have lots of ideas about where you can get started with it. As we go through, if you want to ask a question, do feel free to pop it in the chat. But what I'll do is I might not answer it right away. I might just kind of wait until we get to a certain point where I can pause, just so I'm not constantly answering questions, if that's all right. But do hop in if you have anything to ask. So, okay, so what actually is Pinterest? So I like to think of Pinterest as a bit of like a mixture of lots of other different social media platforms. Pinterest likes to think of itself as a visual discovery engine. Like I said, it's not quite a social media site like Instagram or Facebook, but it's not quite a search engine like Google. It's kind of like this really unique mix. So you can follow people's accounts. So it's kind of similar in that way to Instagram, that you can follow people's accounts, but you can also browse the content and you can also search specific questions, specific search terms or specific on the specific interests as well. So it's kind of like this in-betweeny place. And I think a visual discovery engine is a really good way to think about it. So a really quick look at some Pinterest demographics. The majority of users are women. About 8 out of 10 mothers are on Pinterest, so there's a really big following on Pinterest of women who are mothers. High income households are more likely to use Pinterest than low income households. The average pinner types in 8 searches a month. 77% of Pinterest users say they discover new brands every month, and 83% of users have made purchases based on brand content. So it's a really thriving platform. It is growing all of the time. People are using it in lots and lots of different ways. It's a really, really great place to get your stuff seen as a business owner. Basically, there's so many different ways of doing that, and we're going to cover that as we go on. And obviously it's got some really interesting people, in terms of demographics, who are actually on it as well. So what kind of content themes work well on Pinterest? Pretty much everything. As I started to dig into it a bit more, there's absolutely all sorts of different stuff on Pinterest. Recipes do really well, personal development, self-improvement stuff, anything around health and wellness, spirituality, design, business tips, any kind of products that you might be selling, fashion, anything that's trending. And I'll talk a bit more about trending and how we can use that to do Pinterest better, through understanding what's trending. So there's literally pretty much everything can work in some way, shape or form on Pinterest. What you tend to find is that within the different kind of niches, like different niches will have, just simply because of what it is, will have a larger kind of reach. So it will have you know, a bigger audience. So for example, like recipes and health and wellness stuff tends to really have like a massive reach, that you get, you know, loads of people search for stuff, whereas like business tips, which is what I tend to pin on Pinterest, doesn't get quite as much of a reach, but still worthwhile me being on that platform because I'm still getting better results on there than I would on other platforms, if that makes sense. So it kind of just depends on your niche, but there's definitely viewers and people there who are wanting that content across lots and lots of different things. So why is Pinterest such a great option for different business types? There's a really strong collaborative element to Pinterest that I think a lot of people really like, and I think which we don't always get on other platforms. And I'll explain a bit more around why Pinterest is collaborative, but essentially it's because you are encouraged to share other people's content and other people's things on Pinterest. And I just think that for some people that can feel really nice, like a really different way of doing things. And I think people really enjoy that. You can experience growth on the platform without having to be on it all the time. So if you use a scheduler, you can really just hop in and do your Pinterest marketing in a couple of hours every 2 weeks or every month and still get really good growth. Whereas for other platforms, usually they need a lot more kind of time input to see growth. Any content that you create, including products and things, becomes really evergreen. So I've got, just for example, I've got blog posts on there on Pinterest that I wrote back in like 2016 to 2017 that's still getting traffic back to my website. So it just means that anything that you create, that you put on there, once it's in like the Pinterest kind of engine, it really means that it's going to work harder for you over a longer period of time, which is really, really handy. People are actively looking for solutions which your businesses can provide. So people go onto Pinterest, they're looking for something, like they're searching for something, they're looking for inspiration, they're looking for something. And it's a really, really good place. And people expect to find things that they can purchase or buy that's going to help them with what it is that they're looking for as well. You can have loads and loads of links to your stuff. So a lot of other platforms like Instagram and Facebook, they don't tend to want people to go off that platform. They like to keep people on their platform, and they don't, although you can have, you know, if you've got over 10,000 followers on Instagram, you can have swipe up and things like that. They're not that link friendly, whereas on Pinterest, it's literally links and links and links and links and links back to your stuff, which is really great. There's multiple ways people can come across your content on the platform, which we're going to look at in a sec. And you can also have direct links to your products if you're a product-based business as well. So there's lots of different things, lots of different ways that Pinterest works that I think make it a really great platform for a lot of businesses. So before we kind of go on, what I'd want you guys just to think about is just to consider how your ideal client or customer type might use Pinterest. And I think this is such a handy question to ask yourself and just kind of get into the, you know, thinking about what your business is, how might your people use it? So for example, if you are selling homewares, you might be thinking that your people are creating Pinterest boards for like projects for that, for you know, decorating their room in the house. If you're a photographer, people might be creating Pinterest boards for like a photo shoot or something like that. So just have a bit of a think about how you foresee your people using it. And it's just a helpful question just to kind of have in your mind as we go through this. I'm going to give some examples, but obviously you guys know your business, and I'm going to ask you in a sec just to tell me in the chat box what your business is, so I can tailor, you know, talk a bit more about what, you know, give you some specific examples as well. But just have a bit of a think about where, like, in the ways that they might access it and use it. And it's really helpful just to think of that. And as I go on to the next bit, I'd love for you guys to pop into the chat box just a really quick summary, or even just a couple of words, just to tell me a little bit about what your business is. That'll be really helpful. And then it just means I can make sure that I give some relevant examples for you guys as well. So if you pop into the chat box, I'll have a look at those in a sec as we go through, and that'll be really useful. So this is, in terms of how Pinterest works, this is the example that I feel is really applicable to lots of service-based businesses. So essentially what we have on the bottom of the pyramid is we have our pins, which is the content that we share, and I'm going to explain a bit more about what those are. Our Pinterest boards, which is how we categorize those pins. Then we have our content. Often we have a freebie, and I'm going to talk about why that's relevant. Sometimes the arrow kind of jumps straight from content to services, but often it goes through a freebie. And then we've got your services at the top. So this is how I tend to use Pinterest in my business as a service-based business, but it can work differently as well. So if you are more of a product-based business, what you might find is that you've got pins to your products, and perhaps that jumps straight into sales, or perhaps what you have is that you have like a special offer that kind of helps with that progression up the pyramid as well. So essentially someone might click on a pin, and again, this is just really helpful just to kind of get your head around how people would use it, like what the kind of flow is for people when they kind of find some of your content. So they might click on a pin, they might read a blog post, for example, and then that blog post might make them think, oh, I'm going to sign up for this free thing. And then once they're on your email list, that's where you might actually market to them, is more through your email list rather than the content. So if you're a service-based business, that might be more of that side of things. Or if you're a product-based business, they might click on a pin, view your product, they might sign up to you for your list to get a special offer, and then they might go straight to purchase, or they might, once they're on your list, you might sell to them and market to them that way. So that's often how the kind of like the flow through Pinterest works once someone finds your content. So I'm just gonna have a quick look in the chat box and just see where everyone is at. So we've got virtual assistant, handcrafted leather fashion accessories, lovely, craft workshops, wonderful. Yes, crafting hacks and ideas, definitely. Nutritionist, wellness coach, yes, like all of these are really good for Pinterest. Personal stylist, yes. Business consultant, absolutely. Photography, yes. Rachel. Homewares, yes. Oh, wonderful. A book about domestic violence aimed at teenage girls. That's a really interesting one. I think that would be like quite a specific kind of approach on Pinterest, but that's definitely going to be relevant. A photographer, lots of different products, wonderful. Tea, brilliant. So there's loads of things here that are like going to be so relevant on Pinterest, which is brilliant. So I'll try and use some of those examples as we go through. So the main thing that's going to drive your stuff getting seen on Pinterest is SEO. So probably most people are kind of familiar-ish with what SEO is when it comes to Google, but this is slightly different when it comes to Pinterest. It's kind of like the same kind of premise, but it's slightly different. So it's like I said, it's the main driver in terms of what's going to help your stuff get seen. Pinterest has its own like algorithm in terms of deciding what people actually see in their home feed, which I'm going to explain the different parts of Pinterest and where people can see your stuff. So we need to think about these kind of search terms and what people are going to be searching for, not just in the pins that we create. So again, that's the content that we share, but in the descriptions of those pins, our board names and board descriptions, and also our account bios as well. And ultimately, Pinterest is wanting to share like good quality content from its users to from active pinners. So Pinterest is really, when it's, you know, in terms of their algorithm, what they're looking for is popular content. They're looking for content that people are engaging with. So they're looking for people who are resharing content, so like repinning it to one of their own boards, people who are clicking through to find out more about the pin and perhaps clicking through to the website, to the original source. So Pinterest is looking for like that engagement, and that's how it's going to start to show people more of your stuff. So when it comes to finding your search terms for your work, you want to start off by thinking about your ideal clients. So what kind of words can you imagine that they might be typing into Pinterest to search for? And just to say as well, I forwarded, there's a little worksheet that goes with this training. It's just really simple, just where you can start to like note down your account bio and your boards, descriptions and things with all of this in mind. So don't kind of freak out and, you know, and try and worry too much about what the boards might be at this stage, because we've got like a little process that's going to help you with that. So think about what people might be typing into Pinterest to search. If you can think about any words related to your niche, you know, in terms of what your business does, think of any words that you can think of around that. And what you can do in Pinterest, and what I'll do after we've gone through the slides a bit later on in the training, is I'll show you kind of how to do this. But if you click on the search bar on Pinterest, you can type in some of the words that you've come up with, and what you'll see some topics come up in the autofill. It's a little bit about like what Google does as well. And you'll see some kind of related topics come up, and just start to kind of make a note of some of these different terms that you might want to like weave into your account description and your boards and things. Unlike Google, which I mean, Pinterest does have like longer form keywords. It's not quite as based on these long form keyword searches, which Google tends to, you know, tends to be like the way to do SEO on Google a little bit more. So it's the slightly shorter usually. So it's a little bit slightly different in that way. You've also got the Pinterest trends tool, which we're going to look at in a little bit as well. And this is kind of what you would see. So if you type in something to the search bar, you'll often see like these different, like just like different suggestions that other people will search. You can kind of start like drilling down into different search terms through that. And also here, if you put something into the search term, you can start to see, so if you put self-care in, you'll start to see all these other ones. So if you, let's say you were a self-care coach, for example, you could pop self-care in, and then you could have a board which might be self-care ideas. You could have a self-care quotes board and things like that. And we're going to talk a bit more about the actual stuff that you share on Pinterest and how to kind of have a bit of like a strategy with that in a bit. But this is a really, really good place to start in terms of thinking about structuring your boards and the kind of search terms that you might want to weave into what it is that you do. So these are like the 3 places that you're going to want to think about having your Pinterest like keywords. So you've got your account name and bio, you've got your board title and descriptions, and you've got your pin title and descriptions. Those are the 3 places that you're going to want to have a bit of an awareness of those search terms, basically. One thing to say as well about Pinterest is that it is a visual search, like a visual discovery engine, and it has technology that reads images. So it is very important to have like your SEO in there as well. But what it will do is it'll read the image that you share on Pinterest. It'll be able to pick up like elements of what that is. It has like all this really smart technology. So it will also read what's in the image, which I think is pretty cool. So if you put an image on there of like a cup of tea, it will know that it's an image of a cup of tea. It's very clever, which I think is quite handy as well. So when it comes to setting up your Pinterest account, the first thing that you're going to want to do, if you haven't already, I know some of you guys have obviously got your Pinterest accounts set up already, is getting a Pinterest business account. So making sure that your account is a business account. What that's going to do is it's going to enable you to have a look at analytics. So you can see that your effort and work on Pinterest is actually paying off in terms of people coming into people going back to your website and things like that, which we'll cover again in a little bit. And also what you're going to want to have is the rich pins feature. So the rich pins feature basically is there's a bit of code that goes on your website. You might want to work with a web developer on this, potentially, although you can do it yourself if you're that way inclined. And what it does is it means that Pinterest pulls a bit more information from your website into the pin. So I think there's 4 different kinds of rich pins. I think there's a product rich pin. So if you're a product-based business, you're definitely going to want to have rich pins. It pulls in like the price, the product description, like pulls this into the actual pin. You can have article rich pins, so it will pull in like the author of the article. If you have like a blog post or something like that, it will pull in some of the information from that. It has an app rich pin, so if you were an app, if you had an app, it would pull in information. It would let people click a link and download it immediately. And the other one is a recipe rich pin as well. So if you tend to share recipes, the rich pin feature will pull in the actual recipe into the Pinterest like the actual Pinterest post. So those things can be really, really useful in terms of just giving people more information in terms of like the content that you've actually got on your website and what's actually being pulled in, which is really helpful. In terms of getting those things set up, the easiest thing to do was just to Google search Pinterest business account and rich pins. The Pinterest own instructions will come up. It's really, really straightforward. Like I say, for rich pins, there is a bit of code that needs to go on your website, and it might be that you want to work with a web developer just to help you do that, but it can be done yourself if you know your website platform fairly well too. So other things when it comes to setting up your Pinterest account, I am going to take a break and stop talking in a minute and see if anyone's got any questions. But other things for setting up your Pinterest account, you're going to want to use a picture of yourself or your logo. I would tend to say it's quite nice to have a picture of yourself. People like to see who you are, but obviously it depends on your brand and the way that your business is set up. Add some search terms to your profile name. So if you can, so I've got mine is Wholeheartedly Laura, biz coach for heart-centered coaches. Have some, so I've kind of got like biz coach in there, but think about whether or not you want like what kind of search terms you could have on your profile name. I think you have to shoehorn it in, but it can be useful because when people start to search for things, often what will happen is Pinterest accounts will come up in the search as well as pins, and I'll show you an example of that a bit later. Include search terms in your bio description as well. If you have space and you have like a freebie or a special offer, you can add a link for a URL in there as well if you want. And also you kind of have like this cover image you can see here, and you can have a picture, or what you can also do is you can choose one of your boards and it kind of fills the space there with like a tile effect of the different pins from one of your boards as well. So that's kind of essentially just getting the account set up. Here's some examples. So this account she has, like she's chosen a board to set as like the background for her account, and you can see the tiles of different pins. And she's got, so basically her bio there is just a link. So she's saying free guide for planning a self-care routine, and it's got her freebie in there. So her aim is probably getting people to get onto her list. So she's got that link straight there. And then this other one down here, Simply Fiercely, she tells people, and what she's got there, she's got learn about minimalism. So that's a keyword, simple living keyword, health, self-care keyword, intentional living keyword. So she's got the keywords in there as well. So just a couple of examples. And again, obviously, you can search other people's accounts on Pinterest and get a bit of inspiration from what they might have there as well. But those are just a couple of examples. And again, just, their account names. We've got self-care and mindfulness tips. And here we've got minimalism and intentional living. So they're really clear about what it is that they're about, who they are, and those are useful search terms as well. And this is just an example of a product-based business. So this is what theirs looks like. This is Hush homeware. They've got joyful, laid back, and effortlessly cool clothing to elevate the everyday. That's all that they have in. It's not particularly stuffed with keywords, but it's more of a brand statement-y thing, I think. And then they've got their shop front is on there, and I'm going to talk a bit about this kind of shop front option as well. So before we start for questions, I'm just going to go over a bit about the Pinterest boards as well. So a Pinterest board is a collection of pins by theme or topic. So if you think about how you might want to categorize your content, the things that you might share, that's basically a Pinterest board. Really, it's thinking back to like, Pinterest, it was literally, the idea was like having like a virtual pin board. So it's kind of thinking about the different pin boards you would have if you were going to have different ones for what it is that you share. Boards can be public or secret. Sometimes secret boards are quite handy if you want to have like just pin some stuff for yourself. You can have a board that's secret, that can't be seen. Think about the search terms that came up when you looked at Pinterest, like the SEO stuff, and think about the kind of content that you're going to be creating as well when it comes to kind of like the setting up the board names. and how you might categorize that content into those different boards. And then you would create your board names and descriptions using, just including a few search terms in there. And if you want to, you can create branded board covers. So it's not a big picture, but I'll show you my account a bit later, but you can see I've got some little branded board covers on, and it just makes it look a bit more branded, basically. You don't have to have those, but you can if you want. I tend to suggest that people start with about 4 or 5 boards to begin with. You don't have to have loads. I've got a crazy amount, but that's probably because I've been on there for about years and years and years, and I've had loads of different things that's been pinned on there. But I think starting off with 4 or 5 boards is manageable and is a good place to start. And it might be helpful when you create your boards to think about having like quite broad themes. If you think about your products, your content, and you think about the themes that you might have with those, kind of what we want to think about is how we might be able to have that content pinned to more than just one board. Because ideally we want to kind of, obviously we want our content to be in as many places as possible, to share it in as many ways. So sometimes it can be quite helpful just to think about, okay, so just for my example, I share a lot of content around setting up a coaching business. So when I thought about my boards, I've got one which is I think it's just called coaching business, and I've got one called running an online business. So they're very, very similar. The slight differences, but it means that if I write a blog post, I can probably pin it to at least 3 of my boards. So it's quite handy just to have a little bit of overlap there, if you can, but you don't have to. It can just be helpful. And just link those board themes to your content, your freebie, and your services. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how we think about content, because ultimately, we're in business, we're here, and we want Pinterest to help us make sales, to get more customers, to make more money. So we're going to cover that in a little bit in terms of thinking about your actual content and things that you're going to share on there, because there's a couple of different ways you can approach it as well. So these are just some examples of the boards. You'll find your boards under the saved tab. Pinterest changes what it calls things on the account quite often, which is a bit frustrating. It used to be called, it used to say boards, but now it has saved. So under the saved tab, this is where you'll find your boards. This is an example of mine where I've just got little board covers on, and this is an example of someone else's where she hasn't necessarily got the board covers, but she's used some of her own pins on there as well. And then this is just one of her descriptions. So she's got one of her board self-care rituals and routines. And then you can see in her description, she's got moon rituals, manifesting rituals, abundance rituals, all kinds of spiritual rituals. So again, she's just popped in those key search terms into that board description as well. Creating a pin, I'm just going to have a quick drink, and then we'll go into creating pins. So a pin is basically an image that is shared on Pinterest. So the best thing to think about is the pin and your content are 2 separate things. The pin kind of links to the content. You can have multiple pins. I'm going to explain in a sec. So a pin is an image that is shared on Pinterest. It links back to a piece of content. That piece of content can create more than one pin. So if you've got a product on your website, you could have 10 pins for that product on Pinterest. So you can have multiple pins. A pin needs a title and a description. It doesn't have to be exactly the same as the content. You can get creative there. But again, that title and description needs to be, you need to think about your keywords. When a pin is added to Pinterest, it needs to be added to one of your boards. So it kind of sits underneath one of those boards. You can have just a simple, a straightforward image, or you can have a pin where you've got like some text overlay, like the example that I've got here. And what tends to be the difference, I think, is depending on, again, your business. So if you're a photographer, you're probably going to have more pins that are just straightforward images. If you have products, you're going to want to have just straightforward, beautiful images of your products. Whereas if you're more kind of, if you're a coach or if you're a nutritionist or something like that, you might have more of these style of pins, which are more directing people to like a how-to bit of content, if that makes sense as well. So how you approach what your pins look like is going to be slightly different depending on your actual business. So So like I say, multiple pins can link back to a single piece of content. These are all different pins for the same blog post. And what that just means is that it means that when you create something, a bit of content, or you have a product, you can have all these multiple pins, which just means your content gets such a bigger reach on Pinterest. It's going to have such a much more reach, because those pins are going to get put into the Pinterest engine, and they're going to come out somewhere in terms of where people might see them in the algorithm. So it's really, really handy to have multiple pins. You're going to find your pins under the created tab on your profile. So you like this is an example. This is Anthropology's Pinterest account, and obviously all their pins are beautiful images of their products. And this is just an example of where you can see the pin and the description. Sorry, in the title and the description there as well. So that's just an example of what you'll see if you click into a pin. You can see a bit more of the information that's there as well. So what makes a good pin? So generally speaking, you're going to want to have like a portrait aspect pin, simply because of how people consume information on Pinterest. Usually on the phone app, the portrait aspect tends to work best, usually around about 1,000 to 1,500 pixels. That tends to work best. It's clear and easy to read if you are using text. There's been research that's been done, and again, I wouldn't obsess over this too much, but there's been research that's done that mainly light colours tend to do better in terms of more repins and more click-throughs. So images that are mainly light and warm toned for some reason as well tend to do better. But I wouldn't, at the end of the day, you have your the imagery that you need in your business, and I wouldn't worry about that. But if you were creating pins, a bit like what I have here for some of my content, that can be useful to know that sometimes like the lighter color pins tend to work best. Also, you might want to think about that it's in your brand style as well. So if that you want to use your own branding, especially if you're going to do kind of like these kind of style pins, that it's attractive to look at, that the photography that you're using is beautiful, that it's in focus, all that kind of jazz. And also a good little thing to do is just to have a look on your home feed, and I'm going to explain about where your home feed is a little bit. But if you have a look on your home feed and scroll, just have a bit of a notice about which pins appeal to you most and why. I think it's a really interesting exercise just to kind of look and see, oh, all right, okay, so this pin really jumped out at me because of this reason. It just helps kind of understand like why certain things work better than others as well. It can be quite useful. So again, this is just kind of like the flow and what we're going to want to do in terms of setting up Pinterest. So we're going to set up our account. We're going to create 4 to 5 boards to start off with. We're going to create pins for new and existing content or products. And we're going to pin the pins to the relevant boards along with other good quality content. So I'm going to explain a bit about the other good quality content stuff in a bit as well. So a quick recap, and I'll take some questions as well. So what we've looked at so far, and I realise I've thrown a lot of stuff at you. And I should have said at the start as well, sometimes this stuff, because it like Pinterest works in lots of different ways, and obviously I'm trying to break it down and make it simple and understandable, but it can just take a little bit of kind of playing with it as well before it kind of starts to slot in. It did with me when I first started with it. So I've looked at why Pinterest is awesome, why it's so good for so many different kinds of businesses. We've looked at Pinterest SEO. We've looked at how you set up your account, how to set up your boards. We've looked at how pins work and what makes a good pin. And we've looked at some examples of how you might set up your accounts and boards. So just a reminder here as well, before I look at any questions, you don't have to do Pinterest perfectly to get results. You don't have to get super bogged down with it. What I tend to say to people is, I'd rather people just do something with it than feel like they have to do it perfectly. So if you don't even, I mean, to be honest, I think I used Pinterest for about 2 years and didn't do anything with the SEO side of things, and I still got really good results. So you don't have to kind of get too bogged down with things. If that's the barrier between using it and not using it, just go on there and use it. That's the thing. So I'll have a look in the chat if there's any, and Suzanne, let us know if I missed any questions. So Claire is asking, how do you update the collage background on the cover photo? I changed mine as they were all old pictures, but now can only have a single image. Oh, that's interesting. It might be that Pinterest has changed it so that usually it would give you the option of using an image or choosing a board. But I'm wondering if that's the case, Claire, it might be that they've stopped giving you that option. that could have been an update that they've done to the platform, unfortunately. Usually it would come up in the account settings, but if it's not there, I'll have a look when we kind of come out of the slides as well. Oh, you've just found, Leona just found how to make a board cover. Yes, just when you're inside the board, you've got the option to choose a board cover, either upload one or choose an existing pin. And I think that's all of the questions. Is everyone with us so far? Am I making sense? Or is anyone feeling like massively overwhelmed? Let me know in the chat box. Let's have a little drink before we head on. But yes, hopefully everyone, no one's feeling completely overwhelmed with everything. Oh, definitely overwhelmed, but it sounds so interesting. I think it's there's a lot of like information to take in, I think, about how it works, but the best, like I say, the best way to start, and at the end of this we have got like a little challenge and a little worksheet which is going to help you get started with it. So that's kind of the thing too, if you feel a bit overwhelmed, is just to think about that at the end, and just progressing with that is going to get you going, basically. Wonderful. Right, then we will crack on. So the things that we're going to cover in this section is basically how to get the most out of Pinterest. So how often should you pin? How much of other people's content should you pin? How do you come up with content ideas that are going to do well on Pinterest? How do you get people to join our email lists? I'll include that one because I think certainly in my kind of experience with business, I think the more people can get on an email list, the better, in terms of knowing that we actually can control and own that list, whereas we don't control and own our followings on social media. I always think it's a good strategy to have that we are directing people onto our lists as well. So that's something I always include. And also we're going to look a bit about how we can create viral content as well, because we can do that on Pinterest, and it's really, really cool when it happens as well. So a little bit about how and I'm going to give some examples as well, but this is kind of how I tend to use Pinterest for my business, in terms of how it works for sales and actually getting people to buy stuff from us and work from us. So I've got my pins and Pinterest boards. I've got my content, my freebies and my services. You might have like a sales funnel in between this section. So you might have where someone signs up for a freebie on your email list. You might have a series of emails that directs them towards a product or a service. You might have that there, a little sales funnel in there. And also we want to look at this kind of going downwards. So when we start to think about our content and our pins, we want to be thinking about our services as well. So for example, you don't want to be creating content that has no relevance to your services. You want to be creating content that is going to naturally lead back to the services that you're offering. So for example, in my business, you know, one of the services that I offer is web design. And if I was creating content that like had nothing to do at all with web design, it's going to be really hard to obviously get people to come to move up there and actually work with us, because I'm not sharing relevant content. So it's always really useful just to think about your services and think about like upwards and downwards, that kind of like pyramid thing, because we just want to think about how we can take people on that journey through our content and our pins to send them back. So when we think about our pins and our boards, like what is the relationship and how is that going to send people up towards our services in a way that makes sense? So this is an exact example of how I use this in my business. Again, this might not be relevant to everyone, but hopefully it's a helpful example. So I have on my Pinterest account, I have some boards. So I've got building your website board, I've got an online business board, and I've got branding and web design inspiration board. And then on my website, for example, I've got several blog posts, but these are just some examples. I've got 5 ways to optimize your coaching website, and I've got 10 branding tips for coaches. And then the freebie that I've got is my homepage checklist. So the idea would be that someone I'd pin some of my content into my boards, they'd find that, they'd look at the content, they might want to sign up and get the free thing. And then once they've signed up for the free thing, I've got a little sales funnel. And then I've got my Rock Your Website course, which teaches people how to design their own websites. So that's kind of how it works in theory and in practice for a business like mine. And obviously all of our business is going to be slightly different, but hopefully this gives you a bit of inspiration about how it might work. Here's another example just for a different kind of coach. So let's say this is like a confidence coach. She might have 4 different boards: confidence tips, confidence habits, confidence mindset, work and career tips. And then her blog posts might be how to stop caring what people think, 10 habits of a confident woman. These are all blog post titles that I've researched on Pinterest as well. And then her freebie might be 6 power poses to help you rock your next meeting. And her service might be one-to-one coaching. And she might have a little series of emails after that video that introduces people to the one-to-one coaching. So this is, again, how it might work. What you might find, though, is that sometimes what people do is they just look at the content and actually go straight up to the service. So they don't always need like the freebies, but it can be useful. Again, not everyone is ready just to jump straight in, so it can be useful to have like that free thing and getting people onto your email list element of it as well. Just to give, in terms of if you were a project-based business, you would have your products, you would have your boards that the products might go within. You might have like a free offer or something, just to kind of like smooth that transition a little bit. You know, you might have sign up for our email list and get 10% off or something like that. And then you would have actual like the sale at the top. So again, it might be that people just land on the product and buy it, or it might be that you have like some kind of like helpful segue into it. I think like a free offer or something to get them on your list, so that you can sell to them in the future as well, if they perhaps don't decide to buy at that time when they first see it. So there's different options there. So when it comes to coming up with content ideas, so depending on how you do like how you market your business and what you've already got set up and stuff inside your business, what you might do is you might create content specifically for Pinterest, or you might just share content that you would already create anyway on Pinterest. So there's there's different ways you can approach it. You can be very, very much led, and you can really go all in on the Pinterest strategy and create content with Pinterest in mind, or you might be creating content with Google SEO in mind instead. That's totally fine. So you might kind of think of it from that direction. That's fine. What you can do though with Pinterest, if you want to kind of come up with content creation ideas from Pinterest, you might look at what pins show when you first search a specific word. So you can see what kind of posts are coming up. You don't really want to click through the content. Obviously, you don't want to copy other people's content, but if you note down people's blog posts and titles and things, you can use that for inspiration to create your own blog post titles and content. You can create a new piece of content with your own kind of style on that. You can brainstorm content ideas based on what your freebie would be the natural next step from. So if you do have a free thing, just think about, okay, so what would nicely lead into this free thing, and brainstorm content ideas around that. You might think about common questions you get asked and create content around the answers to those questions. You can look at trends, which is something we're going to look at in a sec. And like I say, you don't always have to be led by Pinterest. It might be that you are creating content in a different way, or doing marketing in a different way. And it's really just about kind of, putting that stuff on Pinterest because why not? You're creating it anyway. There's different ways to approach it. So hopefully that makes sense in terms of thinking of different ideas about what you might create. Generally speaking, when I'm talking about content, I am usually talking about blog posts or articles on a website or products. That tends to be kind of what gets pinned to Pinterest more often than not. Sometimes you can create content that exists simply within Pinterest. So they have story pins, which is like another kind of step, another kind of content, but I'm not going to get into that too much. This is kind of like getting started with Pinterest rather than some of the more advanced things. But generally, when we're thinking about content, we are thinking about articles or blog posts on our website, or actual products, or both sometimes as well. And this is just an example. If you put in career confidence, and you were looking for ideas in terms of what to create content around, you could write a blog post around how to be confident at work. You could write something around how to gain more confidence personally and professionally, but you could change the title around a little bit, so you can get a lot of inspiration for content from Pinterest itself, even for other platforms. You know, if you want to create stuff for Instagram, you can hop on, or I'll often hop on Pinterest and get some inspiration if I get a bit stuck on what to create for Instagram. It's just a really good place for inspiration as well. So I'm going to just introduce you to a couple of tools. These are really, really helpful. They don't often get mentioned. I think sometimes when people do Pinterest stuff, but I find them super, super useful. And this is Pinterest's trends tools. So the first one is Pinterest. Every year, Pinterest will create a big document, a big like website basically, which is all about what it predicts are going to be the big trends for 2021. And it can be really helpful looking at this because it can kind of give you ideas about what might fit in with your, I mean, not every trend is going to fit in with every kind of business, but often there'll be somewhere that you can, something that links into what it is that you do. And it can be really, really helpful to look at that and just think about, okay, so what search terms are they saying are going to, that they predict are going to increase in terms of engagement. So that's a really interesting one you can look at. And then we've also got just Pinterest's real-time reporting on search terms that are trending. So that's just trends at pinterest.com. And this is, 2 seconds, I think we've got a little video. So this is going to just show you, this is the Pinterest trends. Sorry, the Pinterest predicts. And these are some of the things that they predicted were going to trend over 2021. And you can kind of click into any of those and it will give you a bit more information about each of those different ones. You can download it as a PDF as well. So that's a really interesting place to go and find out a bit more about the kind of content that's going to work on Pinterest and that's working. But again, it doesn't mean that if your stuff is not on there, that it's not going to do well on Pinterest. It's just some examples of the things that they think are going to be really popular in the coming year. And then this is the trends tool. So if you go onto Pinterest, onto this trends, onto this URL right now, it will show you the week's top Pinterest trends. This is from a week back in February, I think, when I took this screenshot. And sometimes they're going to be completely random. Just to say they're going to be like, there's, I mean, this is why I say like anything pretty much goes on Pinterest. There's some really random stuff. But what can be helpful is if there's nothing on like the whole, on the first page that's really that relevant, what you can look at is this tool here. So you can put a search term in related to your niche or your business area. And what you'll start to see is, again, you'll start to see some keywords pop up, but you'll start to see how that term might be trending. Sorry, excuse me, I've got a bit of a cold, so I'm sniffing, I do apologise. It will show you how that term is trending in relation to other terms. So you kind of get like this searches over time. So you can see that, for example, this is self-care checklist. You can look at it for the UK and you'll start to see how that search term has trended upwards generally over the last year. So you can start to see which search terms are working well. And it just gives you a little bit more information about how you can utilize those search terms when it comes to your own content and your own Pinterest account as well. And it also show you popular pins down here. So again, you can look and see what's kind of working for that keyword and see whether or not there's anything that you can create that is going to link in with that and that's going to work in a similar way. So when it comes to converting traffic from Pinterest to subscribers, like I say, I think this is an important point because I do think it's worth having, it's always worth trying to get people to join a list if you possibly can, for lots and lots of reasons. But have at least one freebie for your business with a clear call to action to download it within the blog post or content that you're sharing. So like I say, for a service-based business, that might be some kind of like, it could be a free PDF guide, it could be a free audio, a free video series or anything like that. For a project-based business, it might be like a 10% off offer or something similar. And then, like I said, just have that clear call to action. If you are more of if you're sharing content that is more kind of like around the how-to kind of style stuff or recipes and things like that, what you can consider doing is creating multiple freebies and content upgrades. And I'm going to give an example of how that might work in a sec. I'm just going to check the time so we can have and we'll do a break. You want to include a call to action within the blog content or at the start, not just at the end. So often what people do with like free things is it's like right at the end. You might have like a box for someone to sign up or something, but sometimes it's worth actually putting the call to action within the blog content itself to sign up for the free thing. You can try using pop-ups as well for things, and also, like I say, special offers if a business is project based. Those things can be super useful as well. So when it comes to so using content upgrades for high performing posts and things. So I just wanted to give this example. So what happened with my business, and this can very much happen for other people's as well, is that what you'll sometimes see is that one particular blog post or one particular pin or something is like really doing well. Is like it's really getting picked up by Pinterest. You'll start to see like your stats go up. You'll start to see like your website views go up. And what can be really handy is that you want to just kind of utilize that and make the most out of it. So it's about making sure that you are doing something with that traffic that's coming back to your website. So I like to think of content upgrades. It's like if your blog, obviously something about the blog content is awesome, about whatever content it is that you're sharing is resonating with people. So a content upgrade, rather than just like a general freebie for your business, the content upgrade would be something quite specifically linked to the blog post itself. It's much more specific, like I said, than a general freebie. So for example, what happened with me was that I wrote a blog post about using a bullet journal. The content upgrade was a printable habit tracking sheet. So it was very closely linked, and that works really, really well for moving a lot of people onto my email list. Usually a content upgrade should be something that's quite quick and easy to create. It doesn't have to be like loads of work. And what you can do is plug that into like an existing sales funnel or an email sequence if you have one. But again, it's really just about kind of, capturing that audience while they're there so that you can build that relationship with them and help you direct them towards things that they might want to purchase or ways to work with you in the future as well. So this is just the example. So within the blog post, I just had this quick little sign up bar so that they could actually sign up. So while they were reading it and they thought, oh, this is really useful, they could sign up, and then they were on my list, and then I had the opportunity to build that relationship with them and then offer them my coaching services and courses and things like that. So that's super useful. So a quick recap, and then I think we might take a little comfort break. I know that Gemma said it would be handy for us to take maybe just a little 10-minute break. So what we've looked at so far, why Pinterest is great, Pinterest SEO, how to set up your account, your boards and pins, creating content for Pinterest and how it fits into your overall business, and also using Pinterest trends for SEO and creating viral content as well. And like I said, the viral stuff really is about looking at the trends and starting to see whether or not any of those fit into your business. And it is worth keeping an eye, because sometimes they can just go a bit wild. And just a little example, I don't know if you can see this little pin up here, actually I've just noticed it, but I wrote a post. Can anyone remember there was a big trend for Agar? I think it was like back in like 2017-ish, I think. And I wrote a post about it, and it literally just hit as all the books were coming out. And that post, I think I got like about 150,000 hits to my website based on that single post alone, just because I kind of hit it at the right time. So it can be really, it can be a bit random, but it's worth kind of just keeping a bit of an eye on things, because if there's something connected to your business that is gonna trend, it can be massive. It can be a really big deal for your business to get it's going to go viral and get all of that traffic back. So I'm going to just have a look at the chat.
Hi Laura, I can do the questions for
you.
you.
Right, fab, brilliant.
Right.
Thank you.
So how do you make a secret page? I know one of the other people that have been watching it has helped the person that asked
fabulous. Yeah, that's great. Yes.
And Phil's asked, how can I use my landscape format images in portrait mode without losing half the page?
I think you've got the option of either you just share landscape images, and that's just one of the, you just have to kind of accept that they might not do quite as well as the portrait style ones, or it would be having to crop them in some way, or you could, depending on the image and what you would like how you want the pin to be, more like what the pin's leading back to. What you could do is you could have your like portrait aspect shape, and you could have the landscape thing across it, perhaps with some text that tells people a bit about what it is or what it's leading back to. So there's a couple of different ways you could do it. You could either just kind of take the hit and just share it. If the beautiful images, it's probably not going to make a serious amount of difference. But if you did want to have it like in the portrait format, either crop the image if it works, or you can, like I say, have the landscape image across the middle of a wider image and maybe have some text or something that describes a bit more about what it's about. So hopefully that's helpful.
Thank you, Laura. I'm going to ask Ree to come off mute to ask her question. So understanding of it.
Yeah. My book is about domestic violence, and so I'm thinking about search engine optimization and what people would search for. Now, if somebody is in an abusive relationship, they will often check their internet history. Can you clear a Pinternet search history?
That's a really good question. I'm not sure on that one, to be honest. I'd have to go off and research that for you. I'm not entirely sure. I would suspect they probably could, but I will double check that.
Thank you.
If that's all right.
I'll make a note of that, Laura.
Yes, I'll make sure I get that answer back to you. Yeah.
So while I'm in, then my content's obviously going to be, but could I disguise it with other like sort of keywords so that people come across it when they're searching for sparkly handbag or pink shoes or something, you know, like, because it's all teenage orientated. Is it appropriate for me to put those words in so that they happen upon my content within their searches for other things?
What would probably happen is Pinterest probably wouldn't, because Pinterest has this like multi-dimensional way of looking at content. It has the visual thing as well. It would probably pick that up as being, it'd probably mark it as spam. I think if there was a big difference between the content and what the search terms are, I think what it might be thinking about for your content, it might be thinking kind of, I don't know, I mean, again, you obviously know your people, your community and who you're serving, but would they be searching things that are kind of like around the periphery of what's actually going on? So could it be things like, I'm trying to think of a good example here, but might this be searching stuff like, you know, getting on better with my boyfriend or something like that? You know, could there be search that isn't like directly, does that kind of make sense? Could there be searching?
Yeah, so it wouldn't be so far away, sort of like, so boyfriend would be a search. Would it, you know, what the hell would you come up with if you search for boyfriend? What on earth would it give you? I have no idea.
Stick it in, see what comes up.
I'm going to have to go in. I'm just going to have to dive into it and see what comes up with different things, and then see if I can make a.
Yeah, it could be like relationship with boyfriend. You know, there's going to be stuff that kind of comes. I think with your stuff with Pinterest, it is like that kind of. People are probably going to put in like really direct search terms around domestic violence. I wouldn't have thought.
Yeah.
But what they might do is they might be searching around things that are like red flags. Does that kind of make sense? I mean, I know there's people. I'm sure I've seen content on Pinterest around like narcissism and things like that. But that might not be for teenage girls. That might not be something that they would be searching because they might not understand that term and relate that to their partner, for example. So I would maybe, so again, like I say, it might be that you have to be a bit creative with how you like angle your content, but I think there's definitely ways of doing it. Is that helpful?
Yes, thank you.
Danielle's put a couple of suggestions in the chat as well for you. So that's all of the questions for now.
Brilliant.
How long a break do we have?
Do you want to have 10 minutes? Is that going to be useful for everyone? 10-minute break?
Yeah, so if we come back just after 11:05, please. Thank you very much. I'm going to stop the recording. We might need to put it on. There you go.
Fab. Right then. So this section is going to be a bit about kind of like the strategy of how we actually do Pinterest. This is just one kind of strategy that you can use. There's lots of different ways you can approach it, and I'm going to discuss that as well. But this is just a really I'm going to say it's simple. When you see it, you might not think it's simple, but essentially it's a fairly straightforward strategy in terms of sharing your pins and getting the maximum amount of reach that you can with your content that you create. So like I say, a quick reminder before I get into this bit, you can simply do Pinterest just by adding your content whenever you created, you know, sharing other people's stuff to your boards and just going in there when you feel like it, and you might still get some results. I had one of my clients, she messaged us, and I think I've got a screenshot actually towards the end of this presentation, just as a bit of motivation, that she hadn't done anything with Pinterest, yet she's still got a client who found her on Pinterest. So it really can, so you know, don't stress about it, but obviously the real magic and when you're really going to start to see like results is when you approach Pinterest with a clear and consistent strategy, and generally speaking when you use a scheduling tool, because that's going to make it a lot easier for you to manage if you use a scheduling tool, and I'm going to talk about that as well. There's only one rule, generally speaking, it's not to add the same pin to the same board within 30 days. And the reason for that is that Pinterest will mark it as spam. And if Pinterest starts marking your stuff as spam, then you're in a bit of trouble, because it'll stop showing your content to anyone. Unfortunately, it'll stop kind of like showing your content in the smart feed, which is something we're going to explain in a little while as well. So that's the only real rule. But there's lots of different ways we can do it. So the two different ways, you can go into the app, like either the phone app or on the site, and manually pin or use the scheduler. Like there's actual inbuilt scheduler in Pinterest. Usually I think that's best if you actually like using Pinterest personally. So if you like having a bit of a scroll on Pinterest yourself, like, you know, that then I think that's probably not a bad way to start. Or you can use a scheduling tool like Tailwind. So Tailwind comes with lots of extras. It does have a small monthly cost, but it can be worth it depending on how much like emphasis you want to put on Pinterest in your business. So if you're doing manual, if you're doing like the manual pinning and perhaps using Pinterest's built-in scheduler, what you can do is aim to spend about 20 minutes a day on Pinterest, perhaps like 10 minutes into like a morning slot and an evening slot. You're going to pin other people's content, and you're going to repin your own content according to the schedule that we're going to look at. So we're going to kind of have like a bit of a schedule in terms of your own content. Or what you can do is you can use the built-in Pinterest scheduler. So you just need to pop in and share other people's content, but your own content is scheduled as to when it's going to come out. And the reason why we'll want to think about being on there often, rather than having like a massive like 2-hour long manual pinning session like every 2 weeks, is because Pinterest rewards the kind of pinning activity that it wants to see on the platform. So what Pinterest wants to see is people on there regularly sharing content, regularly sharing their own content, regularly sharing other people's content, because that's what makes a good user experience for Pinterest users. So Pinterest is going to reward people who behave like that with getting more views of their stuff, basically. So it's kind of having that in mind when it comes to kind of how you approach it. So like the two kind of 10-minute slots a day kind of work well, but like I say, you might get fed up with that if you're not much of a fan of Pinterest anyway. So using the scheduler can be better. It's totally up to you. Tailwind is $14.99 a month, about £11. And then it means you can completely schedule and automate your pinning. It's going to give you access to Tailwind Communities, so more people share your stuff. So Tailwind Communities is a feature of Tailwind where you can work with other people with other pinners, other content creators, and share each other's things, which again is a really nice collaborative aspect of Pinterest that I really like. And it also means that your work is going to get more reach through working with those people in terms of you sharing their stuff and them sharing yours. Tailwind is very easy to pass over to a virtual assistant if you have one, or when you're ready to outsource, because it's a fairly structured way of using things. It's quite straightforward. And it means you can grow your business without having to be on an app every single day. So generally, I mean, when I've done this training before, it's a lot of people who are a bit disillusioned with Instagram, to be perfectly honest, who find it a little bit difficult to be on that app all of the time. So Pinterest can be a bit of a breath of fresh air in comparison to that, when you use an app like Tailwind, because you can kind of set it and forget it for a little while. Using a scheduling app, it's not essential at all, but it does make it a bit easier. And what you tend to find with Tailwind is that it will, in terms of what Pinterest likes to see, in terms of how, like in terms of behavior and the rate of pinning and what it is that you're sharing, like Tailwind will keep you right. It will alert you if you're going to do anything that's going to be a bit spammy. So it's got some really good features in terms of helping you manage manage your Pinterest account basically. So this is kind of what the strategy might look a bit like, for example. So let's say you create a piece of content on your website, or it might be an old piece of content. What you will do is you will decide which of your boards it's going to be pinned to. So remember, we looked at the different boards. You might have 4 to 5 to begin with, and it might just be one board that gets pinned to, or it might be several boards. So let's just say for this example, it's 3 boards. So you would decide which of your boards it's going to get pinned to, and then what you would do is you would create the same number of pins as the number of boards it's going to be pinned to. So if you're going to pin it to 3 boards, you would want to create 3 different pins. And then what you're going to do is you're going to schedule each pin to be shared to each of those boards with a 7-day interval. So you've got pin 1, it's going to be shared to board 1 on day 1, board 2 on day 7, and board 3 on day 14 or 21, that kind of thing basically. So it's going to have a 7-day interval in terms of how it's going to be shared, which is just going to kind of cascade your content through what it is that you're doing. It's not going to kind of like have all of your stuff just shared at once, and it's just kind of a way of like of sharing that content out. And then what's going to happen is that each pin is going to be pinned to each board, but kind of like on like a rotation. What you can do at this point as well, once you've scheduled each pin to be shared to each board with that 7-day interval, is you can add it to Tailwind Communities if you're going to use Tailwind, so you can share that content there, so it's going to get shared again. And then again, if you're using Tailwind, you can also look at the pins that have been shared and then loop the best performing pins. So Tailwind has a feature called Loop, like the smart loop. And what it means is that once you've created a bit of content or a pin, and it's performed fairly well, you can pop it into the smart loop. And what Tailwind will do is it will basically start to reshare that content on a regular basis, until the end of time, until you stop your account. So it will reshare that, and it just means that your content, once you've spent the time creating it and you've actually done the work, it's going to help you get the most out of it, because it's going to be constantly shared back into Pinterest, which is obviously what we want in terms of getting more of our content out there and getting it seen. So that's kind of like a way of doing it. This is a spreadsheet, and I'm happy to share the spreadsheet actually if it's helpful in terms of laying it out. So what we've got is we've got the blog title, or the content title. We've got the URL for that content. It could be the product URL as well if you're doing products. The pin description. So I like to just note it out there. And the pin description, it doesn't have to be the same for every pin, but it can be. And then what we've got 4. So this is going to be pinned to 4 different boards. And so we've got 4 different pins. We've got 4 different pins, and we've got the links for the pin. So each time you upload one of those images, like whether it's one of those images that we've created on Canva, which I haven't talked about, but one of those images we might have created on Canva or in Photoshop or wherever, or just an image that we have, each of them has an individual URL. So sometimes it can be useful just to have those URLs listed out. And then this is how it's going to be shared. So the first week, the first pin's going to go into this board, then the next board, then the next board, and then the next board the week after. And then, of course, the other pin is going to go into a different one. So you can kind of see how what we've got now is we've got 4 pins, which are going on 4 boards, which gives us all of these places to share it in these multiple ways. So it just amplifies all of your content basically. So you can keep it simple. You don't have to do this. If you're looking at this and thinking, oh my goodness, Laura, what are you wanting us to do with Pinterest? This is crazy. Don't do it. But once you get used to it, you can't, like, your head will get around it. But it's basically amplifying that content in lots of different ways. It's getting loads of pins put out there of yours, and the more pins that you have, the more chances you've got of people seeing it, people clicking through, and people finding you and your business and all of that jazz. So that's kind of a good system to use. This is what I've been using for a while. It's pretty straightforward. It works well. Like I say, it gets maximum amount of gets your content out there. But you don't have to do it if it kind of feels overwhelming. You can simply just share it to one board once. That's absolutely fine. It's totally up to you. And like I say, I can share this if anyone would like this. I'm happy to share this spreadsheet to use as well. So the other thing that we want to think about as well is other people's content and sharing other people's content. So Pinterest wants you to share your own good quality content, but it also wants to see you sharing others as well. And this is really, again, about user experience. So for most of your boards, other than you might have like a specific brand board, for example, that just has your content on, and which is fine as well. It's a good idea to add other people's pins and other people's content. It creates, like, what Pinterest wants to see is like that you have like a diverse board with lots of different content from different people, lots of popular content. And like I say, this is really the collaborative side of Pinterest. It's, you know, a rising tide lifts all boats is the way that I like to see it. And what you might find is that when you first start out with Pinterest, depending on how much of your own content you might already have, like, you know, already on your own website or wherever, what you might find is that you're mostly pinning other people's content. But as you start to have more content yourself, and that you've got like the smart loop set up, or that you're resharing things manually, the ratio could be around 50-50 of your own content and other people's content. But again, that's something that can be played around with, and that's a strategy that is always gonna, you know, Pinterest, just like any other platform, their algorithm shifts and the way that they work shifts, and it's one of those things it's always worth keeping a bit of an eye on. But I mean, like I say, personally, I would probably not go over more than 50-50, but again, you can absolutely play with that. And generally speaking, I think one of the reasons why it is worth sharing other people's content is because most of us don't have like a massive amount of content or the time to create pins for it all. So it's just about kind of finding like where your sweet spot is amongst like how much of your own content you can get pins created for and shared versus the ease of sharing other people's content, because obviously it is a lot easier just to share other people's content as well. But that's not going to damage your own thing. And one of the questions I've often been asked from people when it comes to sharing other people's content is like, well, isn't that, you know, sharing competitor stuff? And what I tend to say is like, you know, if there's like another, like, let's say you're a bakery and there's another baker's down around the corner, like I wouldn't necessarily share their stuff, but generally speaking, like it's not going to harm your Pinterest account or your business to share other people's stuff. It's really part of the just part of how Pinterest works and what it wants to see. And it helps with the, like I say, Pinterest algorithm is based on this kind of sharing of other people's content as well. If you're using Tailwind, what you can do is share posts from Tailwind Communities. So like I say, the communities are these kind of little, a bit like, I don't know if anyone's ever come across Instagram pods. You know, that used to be a bit of a thing, didn't it, a little while ago, where you would have a pod and you would comment on other people's stuff. Tailwind has communities where these are a bit more legit. You're not going to get penalised for using them. And it's just groups of people who have a similar kind of niche or a similar kind of business. And it's about kind of sharing each other's content. So it's just really good because what you can assume is that people who are finding someone with a similar-ish business to yours as content, then they're going to be interested in your content too. So just as you would if you were doing any collaboration in business, it kind of works in a similar way. What you can also do as well is when you're in any of your boards, if you click the More Ideas button, you're going to see some content that you could add to your board that's going to be relevant from there as well if you want to find content to share. You can also just search Pinterest and add the content that comes up in the searches to the relevant boards. And if you're using Tailwind, you can add those things to your schedule in Tailwind and they will share them out, so that other people's content is shared out across the schedule. And I'll show you inside Tailwind as well. Just checking the time, make sure I'm not running out. Or what you can do is you can do that repinning of people's content as part of your little 10 minutes morning and evening if you're going to do it manually as well. So kind of thinking towards like the Pinterest next level stuff. and what you might want to look at if you want to really take things a step forward is obviously creating some new boards and like expanding that initial 4 to 5 boards as your own content and everything grows and your services grow. You can try out video or story pins. So story pins are one of the newer features of Pinterest. They are kind of modeled a little bit on Instagram stories, and the kind of thing with them is that they're not quite as set up in terms of like, again, directing people back to your site, but they are popular in terms of like getting, if you want to kind of get seen on Pinterest, that can be useful. You can try out Pinterest ads. So Pinterest ads are this whole other thing, you know, to Facebook. They work very differently to Facebook, but they can be really, if you feel that your audience is on Pinterest, then, you know, ads could be really, really useful and checking out and looking at. If you sell products, you can set up a shop. So Pinterest now has a feature where on your account you can have like a shop and you can showcase all of your products, which I think is a great feature if you're a product-based business. You can also look at joining group boards. So it's not as popular as what it used to be, but what you could used to be able to do is join someone would manage a group board. And the idea was that you would, a bit kind of working in a similar way to Tailwind Communities, is that you would share your content to that group board and you would reshare other people's content out of that group board to your other boards as well. So those group boards do exist around and about. You can play around with the pinning schedule. So again, you could pin more of your own content more often. Again, that like it's really somewhere to explore and see what happens. And again, Pinterest is changing, just like every other platform, how they work, and what's going to be best practice now is not going to be best practice, you know, in 2 months' time, for example. So it's kind of shifting, but I think a lot of the stuff, and this is why that little strategy that I've just shared in terms of, you know, create the same amount of pins per the boards you're going to share them in a 7-day interval, then loop them. That's a pretty solid strategy that shouldn't, you know, that should set you up well. But then on top of that, you definitely want to kind of start to explore that and play with how often you share your own content and just really play around with what kind of comes through after that as well. And now I just want to share a little bit about checking your results. So I think this is a really useful, obviously useful and helpful, important thing. You want to see that the time that you're spending on the platform is actually, you know, converting into usefulness in your business. So in terms of what's actually important, so Pinterest will give you analytics on impressions, engagement, followers, like where they've clicked on the pin but haven't actually clicked through with the website and stuff like that. What's actually important is the outbound clicks to your own content. That's generally speaking what we want to see increasing, because that's where we know that people are actually getting through to your website and are actually finding out more about you, and that's like the biggest thing that we want to see increasing. And what tends to happen when you start using Pinterest is you see the impressions grow, and then you see the engagement grow, and then you eventually see the outbound clicks grow. So it's often the last thing that kind of grows the outbound clicks. Followers aren't that important, and I kind of hastily say that as someone with 94,000 followers, a nice impressive number, but followers aren't that important. There is a follower feed, and I'll show you guys that in a sec. So it can be useful, and like it's definitely not something that, you know, that if you've got followers, that's brilliant, but it's not something to worry about if you don't have like a massive follower number. It's not like Instagram, because people can still see your content even if they're not following you. Through the smart feed and through the Pinterest algorithm. So you can look at your analytics in your Pinterest account. You can also use Google Analytics as well. So if you have Google Analytics on your website, you'll be able to see what proportion of your traffic is coming from Pinterest. Pinterest can be a bit of a slow burn. I tend to say give it at least 6 months of at least semi-consistent like pinning to look at whether or not it's actually working for your business or not. I think it's worth giving it that amount of time, because it is just it's a slower pace than like Facebook and Instagram, and sometimes people don't realize that when they get started with it and kind of want to see stuff happening, you know, straight away. What I tend to think of it is that a kind of Pinterest, like, it will take your content and then it kind of sits with it for a bit and then figures out where to put it. It's almost like it has a little think and then figures out, okay, so this needs to go there, and then you start to see it kind of get some traction. And the same kind of thing goes for their ads as well. Like with Facebook ads, you tend to kind of see like it'll start converting quite quickly, whereas with Pinterest ads, it takes a little bit more time for them to kind of figure out where it needs to be, and who they need to be showing it to. And like I say, yet at the same time, sometimes literally all you need is like either the right person to repin your content or the right topic, and it'll just go viral, and then you're going to get massive results from it. So it can be pretty cool like that as well. Again, just remember, the more of your own content that you pin, the more chance you have of people visiting your site. You still want to think about that ratio between your own content and other people's, but again, that is something that you can play with. What you do want to do is check in on your results like each month probably, and just so you can spot any of those well-performing pins or blog posts, so you can make the most out of it. You know, if you've suddenly got like a bit of content that's doing really, really well, it really is worth thinking like, what can I do with this content to maximize it while it's so popular. And that might be, you know, putting a new call to action on there, or like I say, creating a content upgrade or something like that. There's all sorts of different things that you could do with it. And a few reminders as we kind of come down out of the slides and things. Content in different niches is going to perform completely differently, so don't try and compare to anyone else. It's, you know, depending on what your niche is, it's going to get a different level of you know, engagement and things like that. Like I say, my content now as a business coach, it's never going to get the same kind of outbound clicks as what I was when I was a health coach. I used to be a health coach, in case anyone didn't realize. I used to be a health coach, and when I was sharing like recipes and stuff like that, like I was getting hundreds of thousands of clicks to my website, like absolutely loads, because that's the kind that's pretty much universally relevant to a lot of people. Whereas now as a business coach, I still get a lot of traffic, but not to the volume of what I would do of when I was a health coach. But that's okay, because it's still brilliant traffic, and it's still doing, you know, doing what I need to do in my business. So it's just helpful just to be aware that there's going to be differences, I think, in terms of your niche and things like that. You don't have to use Tailwind, but it will make Pinterest more successful for you, and it definitely will accelerate it and make it a lot easier if you do use it. And like I say, you don't even have to use it daily. Like literally, if all you want to do is just pin your stuff when you want, like that's fine. You know, start where you're at. It's not about being perfect. It's not about doing everything exactly right, or it's not worth doing. It's just kind of doing what you can. I honestly tend to have the opinion that Pinterest is a no-brainer. If you're creating content somewhere, even if your thing isn't Pinterest, like even if your main thing is Instagram or your main thing is blogging for Google SEO, like it's just a no-brainer to not share it. It's just such a simple thing to do, just to share it over there. And you don't have to do that whole strategy or have Tailwind. You can just share it and you're going to get something out of it. It's a bit of a no-brainer. Like I say, don't get bogged down in SEO, it becomes a barrier. And don't feel like you have to force content creation to fit with the platform. You can be led by Pinterest. You can absolutely like make Pinterest the driver, but you don't have to. You know, if you're creating content in another way, you can just share it on Pinterest and just give it a try. Just give it a try. And what I just wanted to share, this is just a little comment that I got from one of my clients, Julie. She said, she woke up to this email this morning and I've literally done almost nothing at this point. So someone found her on Pinterest, who was wanting to work with her, a client inquiry, and she'd done literally nothing. So I just thought it was a nice thing to share, just to kind of, you know, but can you imagine what results she might be getting if she was doing a bit more with it as well? So you never know who might find you on there as well. So next steps, I mean, I'm going to take some questions and stuff in a second. I'm going to hop out of the slides and just actually go into the Pinterest account itself and just show you a few little things in there. But the next things to do is to set up your account, or review an existing account if you've already got one set up. There's a worksheet that I forwarded over to Gemma, and your challenge to kind of get things done to start moving forward is to set up your account and boards. So again, the worksheet will help guide you through that. Create your first pin and share it to one of your boards and start repinning others' content. And that's the little challenge I'd love for you to get stuck in with. So has anyone got any questions? And then what I'll do after questions is I will hop out of the slides, because we've got half an hour left, and jump into Pinterest itself and just show you a couple of the things that are actually in the account.
So question one, why would you put the same pin onto the same board? What are the benefits?
Same pin onto the same board. What you would do is you wouldn't want to put it on the same board for, like I say, for that interval. So I think it was 30 days I said, wasn't it? What you would do is you put it on the same board because it would it's adding it twice, and the more times that you have it added, the better, if that makes sense. So it's like trying to think of how I can explain it. So let's say, so you go through that process where you've got your pins on the different boards. So the pins kind of like is being rotated through all of those. And then what you would do is you would look at the ones that usually the ones that have performed a bit better. There's no point in kind of like resharing something that hasn't performed that well. Because if it hasn't performed that well in the first share, it's probably nothing major is going to change. But if it's performed quite well, sharing it again, it's just it's another place where your content can be found. If that kind of makes sense?
It does. Claire has said she's had some previous training where Pinterest encourages creators versus curators.
Mm-hmm.
It was a little bit conflicting to what you've mentioned earlier.
Mm-hmm. I think it's honestly, at the end of the day, the only people who know what Pinterest are doing is Pinterest themselves. And I tend to think that they are going to reward the way of sharing content that they want to have, that for the users. That ultimately all platforms are interested in user experience, because what they're bothered about is ad revenue. That's how they make the money. So they want people to be on that platform for as long as possible, to be enjoying that platform. So if you are doing things that are going to help with that experience, I don't necessarily think it's about, I know Pinterest are obviously interested in creators because they want the content on there, but I've never seen it. I suppose it depends on the context of that question. I think it's more about behavior, if that makes sense.
Claire, do you want to take yourself off mute?
Yeah. Okay. So it was about the fact that it's wanting people to be creating new content, not just recycling what's already out there. And that by all means, when you're starting off and you don't have your own content, that you've kind of got no choice but to share. But that you need a lot more of your own created content. You need to be seen as a creator and not a curator. And
I see what you mean.
As I understand it, that has come from training delivered directly by Pinterest themselves. But
right, yeah. I think it's, well, no, I think I don't necessarily think it is conflicting. I think what they're saying is that obviously they want people to be creating content. That's part of their user experience. It's by the by that everyone in this Zoom room is people who are going to be creating content. I think in terms of the ratio, in terms of what it is that you're sharing, I think that's always the question mark in terms of what do Pinterest want us to be just sharing our own content. I don't necessarily think that's the case, because nothing's set up in that way really with Pinterest, like in terms of how it works. I think it's all about playing with that ratio in terms of your own content. But for a lot of people, if you're in terms of like how often Pinterest like to see stuff shared, it would be very, very difficult to be sharing just constantly creating your own content. Does that kind of make sense?
Okay, yeah.
So I don't necessarily think it's conflicting what I've said. I think it's because I'm assuming everyone in here is a creator really. It's just that it's going to be very difficult to have the volume of content to be constantly sharing that to the point of it's being over 50% and still sharing like pins like 10 or 20 times a day. But at the end of the day, if you have that amount of content, then you, like I said, you can absolutely play with that percentage or that ratio and see what gets better results, because I think Pinterest is, like every platform, always changing and tweaking with their algorithm.
And do you think it needs to be up to the 10, 20 pins a day?
I think it really depends on how much content you have. I think this is the thing. And what I've always kind of found in the past is, Tailwind's a good place to start with, because they kind of give you a bit of direction, so you're not just kind of starting from dot, you know what I mean? I think if you've got a lot of content, again, it's kind of like seeing where that ratio lies. You know, if you've got enough content to pin 10 to 20 pins a day of your own content, you could certainly give that a go. I think, you know, Pinterest is probably wanting to see like around about that level. Some people pin hundreds a day. It's what I'm interested in for you guys is actually what's doable, not what's pie in the sky. Do you know what I mean? Like at the end of the day, you know, if you in an ideal world, perhaps what would work best on Pinterest would be pinning, 100 pins a day and pinning, 70% of that being yours, but that's not realistic for most people who are going to use it. And I think what I want for it to be, or what I want you guys to get out of this, is to make it usable as well, which is why I'm not necessarily suggesting that you do like a crazy number of your own pins, because you probably haven't got that amount of content, you probably haven't got that amount of time.
No.
Which is the issue with a lot of platforms, I think, at the minute, is, in terms of what they need for stuff. It's like it's just the amount of time. So I think it's making it doable, but I still think you can get really, really good results without having to create like a crazy number. And I think 10 to 20, like sharing 10 to 20 pins, either your own content and other people's, or a mixture of, is a good place to start in terms of per day. But a good thing about Tailwind is it'll give you a bit of direction on that. But it can be a lot more, it can be a lot less. It's literally just kind of whatever is doable for you.
Okay, thank you.
And sustainable.
Yes.
The next question is, can you share services in a shop?
I don't think you can, because I think the way that the shop works is that it pulls, I think actually it would depend on how you have your services set up on your website. So what it tends to do with the rich pins in terms of setting up the shop and the products is it's pulling like metadata out of the website. So what it will do is let's say that you have like an e-commerce store set up, and you have your services kind of listed almost like using like a Shopify or a WooCommerce kind of setup, which some people have done, then you probably could pull the information in from that. So there's a potential that you could do it that way, but it would like your services would need to be and it's probably worth it like exploring this a little bit more, because I'm not an expert in terms of like the shop feature, but my view would be that it would need to be pulling the rich data to create a product. So it would need to be some kind of like, you'd have to have your services set up as products on your website, if that kind of makes sense, hopefully. To have asked it, but it's worth looking into it. But that's how I think it works at the moment.
Okay, thank you very much. The next question is from Nicola. Nicola, did you want to come off mute, or will I just go through it?
No, I haven't got my hair done, I'm afraid, so I'm not putting the camera on or asking. So just ask for us, thank you.
Right. So Nicola says, I've created the contact board covers in Canva for each board. Some of them are displaying perfectly. Some of them are half hidden. Is it a quirk in Pinterest desktop versus mobile?
It could very well be, yes. It could very well be. I think it's what you'll find with Pinterest is there's some like weird little things that tend to like work on the desktop and then don't work on the mobile, or vice versa. Some things work on the mobile and don't work on the desktop. It can be a little bit weird. It might just be that the way that the board covers are cropped is different.
I just don't understand, because I've created them on the same template, and I've just, as we're speaking, I've uploaded 5 just to sort the board covers out. One of them or 2 of them are fine and the others aren't.
Yeah.
It's fine on the phone.
Yeah, it's annoying. I think
driving us mad.
Yeah, I think when I've set up mine, I think, did I try and keep stuff in the middle?
Yeah,
you know what I mean? So it's like away from the edges, yeah.
Smack in the middle with the same text, smack in the middle, and some are just disappearing and some aren't. So I'm going to leave it because it's making me cross. So I'll leave it and I'll come back to it. And also, have you ever tried scheduling Canva from Canva for your pins? Because you can, because the scheduling tool on Canva is awesome, but obviously Tailwind has always been the thing that everyone is, pushed with Pinterest. But if we're creating Canva and banging it out, because you can schedule in there. Have you tried that? Does it work? Is it any good, or have you not?
I haven't personally tried it. I think the impression I get with the Canva one is that it works a little bit like Pinterest's own inbuilt scheduling tool. So it doesn't, what I don't think it does is it doesn't, so with Tailwind, what you can do is you can set it so that it will pin itself. So it, 2 seconds, I'm trying to explain myself better. So if you're using Canva or Pinterest to schedule, you can like schedule that one pin, like to schedule it to be pinned again in the future. What you can do with Tailwind is you can schedule that one pin to be pinned to all those boards at a 7-day interval. So what it does is it kind of like saves the time of having to go back in and reschedule that for like the next week and then the next week.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, so it really depends on what strategy you want to use. So if you want to use the strategy that I've kind of laid out there, it's a lot easier to use Tailwind because you just literally just kind of like click, and I can show how to do it. You can set your 7-day interval in there, whereas you can't do that. You would have to like reschedule each one.
Do it each time. I think, yeah, just for people who maybe, if you haven't got that 15 quid extra budget, and if you're using Canva anyway, especially if you're already paying for Canva, it might be, and it is a clot on. I hear what you're saying, because you copy and paste, and in 1 week, 2 week, 3 week, 4, you're looking at the grid, you're making sure it's scheduled on this with a 7-day interval. But it is there to use. It is really basic functionality. I suspect as Canva gets more and more, rolls out. I mean, the changes in Canva have been enormous, that I suspect the functionality will get better. But I just wondered if you'd used it yourself and had any knowledge of it, because sometimes you use these other scheduling tools and it all goes haywire and comes out on the wrong day and the wrong week with the wrong title.
And again, just like what I was saying, I think if using Canva makes it easier to use Pinterest, then just use it. Well, like there's no, you know what I mean?
Point. Yeah. So you're not actually using another third party app.
If it makes it easier, because I mean, like I say, I think what we've all got to ask ourselves, and it's a bit like in terms of how you use it, like there's always going to be like the picture perfect pie in the sky way of using a platform, like for Instagram, if I was posting several times a day with fantastic content and what I mean, but there's real life as well. And I think, and what I'd rather use do, and I still think the good thing is you can still get good results, but using it in a way that is going to work for you, because because if it's me, I mean, usually what happen is if I try and do it perfectly, I just won't bother at all. So I kind of like say to myself, well, look, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do the best I can do with it. I know that's going to get some good results, and I'm going to go with that, because the alternative is just not using it at all and not getting any results.
Yeah. Out of interest, just completely off track, how many places do you share? Are you using most of the platforms, all of the platforms? Obviously, Pinterest is your biggest one. Your Instagram feed is pretty impressive. It looks beautiful.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you.
And
I mean, you can automatically share your Instagram stuff over to Pinterest as well for anyone who's interested. So, you although it's not like the ideal shape unless you're using like the slightly longer Instagram stuff, but you can do that. There's a way to share your Instagram stuff directly to your Pinterest. But yeah, I tend to use Pinterest as my first thing. So I do blogs. So a blog post is my primary form of content, and then that's kind of what I try and repurpose. I try and repurpose that into some Instagram posts, share it on Pinterest. I'm trying to do a bit better with Google SEO stuff as well. And I think that's I mean, it's like thinking of your content in that way is quite helpful, I think, in terms of rather than like a main platform as like what your main form of content is, and then just how you can get your biggest bang for your buck out of it, really, isn't it?
For sure. But as a service provider, I'm just really interested, because you didn't mention Facebook, you didn't mention LinkedIn, you mentioned your blogs first, which is great because we want to get stuff on our own websites. But actually, your strategy as a service provider, Mint as a service provider itself, is to not use some of the platforms we all use. Or maybe not in that priority order. Interesting. And you get sales from Pinterest then?
Oh yes, definitely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, loads. Okay. It's mainly through, like I say, it's what tends to happen in my business is it's getting people onto the email list first. I mean, I think I've had a couple of people who have not been on the email list and who have just kind of found us, but it generally they join the email list, and then we kind of build that relationship and stuff, and then that's how they end up working with us in some way, shape or form, or buying a course or something like that. Awesome. And like I say, especially when I was even when I was a health coach, I mean, it was massive, absolutely massive.
So it really ties in with your email strategy. So guys, you need to go back and watch the email training we've had as well. So what you're saying, I think, is use this to get people to sign up to emails, get them on your emails, and then do something with the emails, because there's no point in getting people to sign up and then not doing anything with that. So then you're in your email strategy, which is regular and concurrent and absolutely, and all the stuff we've done on that. But that's what I'm hearing from you, that it's the biggest driver. But the sales aren't necessarily coming from Pinterest. They're coming from the work you're doing on your email strategy and what you're sending out, what freebies you've got. It's just Pinterest is the place you're grabbing them first.
And I think Pinterest is really good for that, because what you don't tend to get with Instagram, and to some extent Facebook as well, is that easy links onto and the multiple links back to your website. So getting them onto your list is often a much easier process than I think getting people off of Instagram or wherever else.
I just think it's really important that we're really clear on what we're doing this for, and I know you covered it, but it's this idea that we are doing this to get people into our website, on our stuff. We are doing it, you know, in that mix of content you're talking about, sharing and sharing others, you know, but if you're objective, because you start with the outcome that you want, and the outcome that you want is people on your, oh look, yeah, I'll put the, look, don't mind me here, right? So look, I look like I've been dragged through all the bushes backwards. So you know, the outcome that we want, guys, is people on your email newsletter, because then you can sell at them far more easily when they're there. So if you're using Pinterest and you're putting enough content on, I mean, there's no way you're all going to put 100 posts a day on. I mean, come on, let's just be really clear about this. But if the outcome that you want is to build an email list, so from that email list you can sell, that's what Laura's telling you. Actually, if we break it down to the really simple terms, and then you've got to create the content. But if you've got it on your website, of course, then you've got something to link from Pinterest back to your website. So think about your outcome. Like for me right now, we're really great at keeping in touch with you all, but I'm not really great at developing a newsletter database of people who don't know us. So for me now, sitting here thinking, how many things can go onto Pinterest to drive people to a freebie, to drive people into a newsletter, and then what am I going to do with that? Because driving them to the newsletter isn't the point. The point is what you do after that. That's what matters. So then there's the freebie, then there's your funnel, then you're driving people round and round, circular. But with Pinterest, it seems, Laura, you can just keep repinning, as long as you're not breaking the 30-day rule.
Yeah.
You can keep repinning the stuff that you've already got on your website. You might change the image, so the image is changed and it makes it look a little bit different.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
But you are repinning and repinning and repinning, and that actually makes it easier. You don't have to create new content every day. You have to have a timed schedule where you can repin and repin and repin. Yeah? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's it in a nutshell.
Thank you very much. This is for me, by the way. I'm asking for me.
Oh, no, that's fine.
We need to do this, but
yeah,
you know, bearing in mind the time management situation, i.e., we're all rubbish at it. I'm looking for ways to make this easier for us as well. You know,
definitely.
I know that I can repin right onto different boards, change images, repin after 30 days the same bit of content. Then all of a sudden, every month I can repin something that I've pinned before. And that then gives us 12 months worth of pinning. That one piece of content over 12 months.
It's just such a more, you know, you spend, like most of us are spending a lot of time. If we're writing a blog post, we're usually spending quite a lot of time to write that and create it. So it just makes sense to me that we get as much use out of it, and I think Pinterest is a really good platform for that.
Yeah, agree. Right. I'll go off because I'll just, I'll go off because you've got a couple of more questions there, and I think you were going to show us Tailwind. I was going to hop into it. Yes, like 10 minutes. Yes, we've got 10 minutes, so we'll better squeeze it in. Yeah, I'll go. See you. Thank you. Bye.
Laura, if you want to do Tailwind first, and if there's none of the you can't cover the questions, could you just drop the individuals a little message afterwards?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, I can do. Yeah, that's fine. So 2 seconds, I'm just going to move my little window around. There we go, so I can see what I'm doing. So this is inside Tailwind. And what you have is 2 seconds. So this is Tailwind Communities. And sometimes it just takes a little bit of loading, but here we go. Slightly slow. And what you'll see is, if you're new to Tailwind, you'll see like a search. So you can like find communities. And then what you'll find is, once you've kind of signed up some communities, you've got a list of them here. And then what you'll see is, you see the list of the communities that you're in. And then with each one, what you'll see is the number of items that you've submitted versus the number of items that you've shared. Because usually each community has a rule, so it has guidelines, and usually it's like either like one piece of content in, one piece of content out, or one piece of content in and 3 pieces of content out. However, it is so that basically so that it's always, so people aren't just putting their own content in and not sharing anyone else's. That's basically how it kind of works. So you can always see like where you're at in terms of like, and it would go red if you hadn't shared enough with enough of other people's content. But basically you would add your content here, and this is where you see everyone else's content. And what you've got is, so this is where you would see, and like I said, there's different kinds of and all of like the businessy ones, so like online content creators and things like that. So those are the communities. And then what we've got is we've got the publisher. So the publisher inside Tailwind is where all of your scheduled stuff goes. So this is going to include your pins, and it's going to include other people's pins. So this, I'm just going to try to see if I can see any of mine. So there's one of my pins there, so that's scheduled, and then the other ones are other people's content that's all scheduling. You can see the board that it's going to be pinned to, and it's got some random times in the morning because for some reason it goes to, I don't know why it's got a custom time, but basically what it can do is it can, if you click on auto queue, it'll automatically queue your content and schedule it when it's most likely to get the best engagement. So this is kind of where you see all of your stuff that's scheduled, and you can see when things are going to go out. And the idea is that you want to fill these slots. So this is something that I give to my VA, so she obviously hasn't filled up my slots, but you would want all of these slots filled with either other people's content or your own. And you see another one of mine there. And then what you would do is, so you would fill your schedule, and then what I tend to do, or what my VA does, is every 2 weeks she would come in, like fill the schedule up for 2 weeks, and then come back, and the next 2 weeks then fill the schedule, share some of my new content, because I tend to blog every 2 weeks, share some old content at the same time, and then you would add things to the smart loop. So like I say, what I would tend to do is look through the content that you've got and look at the stuff that's performed like the best, and then add those things to the loop. You can set up different loops. So what you can do is you can have like seasonal loops. So if for example you were creating content that was very seasonal, so for example when I used to do more health and well-being content, I used to do stuff around summer, around spring, or like autumn hygge stuff, and different things like that. And you could set up like a loop where it would only share stuff that's seasonally relevant, which was quite handy. But you would put this in, and then what would happen is that when the stuff is in the smart loop, it gets added to your overall schedule. So you kind of see everything there. You can pin from Instagram. You've got that little option there, so you can link it to your Instagram, which for some reason I think mine is there, but it's not there linked in. But you can pin from Instagram there if you want to. You can view your schedule. And one of the things that, so this is where you can change like how many slots, and I was saying before, you could have 100 pins sharing each day, you could have 10 or 20, like this is where you could have your slots. So it tends to set you up when you first get started. I think I've got 13 per day, but if I wanted to, and I had the time to fill the slots, this is like the main thing. If I had the time to fill the slots, I could add lots of different slots, and these are all suggested time slots. So your pins often receive high engagement at this time. So you could stick your suggested slots in, and you could increase the amount of slots that you have for stuff to be scheduled into, basically. And then there's a new feature. I don't think I have this on mine because I still like using Canva, but they have got a feature called Tailwind Create, and basically what they do is you put in a few photographs, you put in your brand colors, you put in the some of the text stuff, and then what they'll do is they'll like create pins for you. So if you want to do like a lot of pins and save time, I think it's an extra cost. I'm personally quite happy using Canva, but if you wanted to, like this actually just kind of creates like a bunch of pins for you and kind of makes that whole process of creating the pin design. If this, like, again, this might not be relevant to your business so much, but if it is creating this kind of content, then that can be quite helpful as well. So those are the main features of Tailwind. And then what you've got is like a plugin. So 2 seconds, I'm going to go into my account, and let's just see, 2 seconds. So I'm going to go into the home feed. So the home feed is this is like where Pinterest shows you like a algorithm curated bunch of pins, so based on your previous search history, based on stuff that it might think is interesting to you, based on things that you've pinned in the past, like all that kind of jazz. This is where you would see, like, you see all sorts of random stuff in here. And then what you would do is, let's say that I wanted to schedule this, I would click into this, and then I would click on the schedule, and then I would decide which board I wanted this in. So let's say I probably want this in like social media marketing, and then I would just add to the queue. 2 seconds, let me clear that, and I would just add to the queue. Oh, 2 seconds. And that would be added to the queue. So that's a really easy, quick and easy way to share other people's content. And then if I was pinning one of my own, let's just have a quick look, just so I can show you. I'm going to go back to my own thing. Right, where's my create pin? I'm just going to do a quick example. So actually no, 2 seconds, I'm not going to do it that way. 2 seconds, I'm going to show you an existing pin. So once you've created your pin, so once you've actually created it and you've got a pin here, what you would do is you would go into the pin and then you would go to schedule. So this is the 7-day thing. So what you would do is you would put your boards in. So I've got like a list of like my general business boards. You put your boards in, and then what you would do is you would use interval, and then a 7-day interval. You would just see where they're at. You would check the start date. So what I sometimes do is, if I'm scheduling a lot of pins at once, I'll have the first pin, I'll have like start on that day, and then I might have like the next pin start on the next day, and that kind of thing. And then you would just go to open time slots. It's going to use open time slots in your publisher and in your schedule, or you can do optimize. It's totally whatever you want to do. Set interval and then schedule now, and that's going to schedule it up into those boards. And then it's as simple as that. So it's really quick in terms of like scheduling across those boards in that kind of 7-day interval way. And I think I'm going to stop because I know we're nearly done, but just a couple of things. So like I said, that's the home feed where people see like this create, and this is where a lot of people are going to see your content if they aren't already following you. They're going to see it here, or they're going to see it when they search for something. I don't know why I haven't searched acrylic nails, but I think they're coming up because they're a popular thing. But you know, it comes up with like all these different things. It shows you what's popular on Pinterest and all this kind of stuff. You've got the today feed, which kind of pulls in some like key like trends and stuff. You've got your following feed, so this is where people who are following who you are following are going to see stuff, or if people are following you. And yeah, and then you've got your analytics up here as well, so you can see your analytics, and you can look at different accounts and stuff like that. You can look at the source of pins, you can look at impressions versus like save rate, outbound click rate, all sorts of things in there as well. But I'm going to stop, and then and then if we've got any questions, so let me know. I'm just going to, there we go.
There's a couple of interrelated ones, and
yes.
One is, how do you share from Insta to Pinterest? And following on from that, if you post from Instagram to Pinterest, is there a way to link to website or Freebie?
So what I would say is, if you are sharing stuff from Instagram to Pinterest and you want to link to a freebie, what you would need to do is you would need to, rather than pinning from Instagram, because it's always going to link back to the original source of the original source of the content, so it's also always going to link back to Instagram. But what you could do is you could share the image. If you have the image separate from Instagram, you could share that image up there with the same caption, but you could link it back to a different URL. So you could have a URL for freebie if you wanted to do it that way. When you're generally wanting to share stuff from Instagram to Pinterest, you can either use that Tailwind feature, or what I've used before is, it's a website called If This Then That, and I think it's I can't remember what it is now. I'll see if I can find the link and put it in, but it's If This Then That. And what you can do is you can set up like a little applet. This then that. You can set up a little applet, and what it'll do is it'll automatically share. I'm just going to put the link in the chat box. You can automatically set it up so that it automatically shares your Instagram content over to Pinterest. And again, it's a bit of an easy win, really. If it's, you know, if that's something that's, you know, helpful, you might, if you're sharing stuff on Instagram anyway and you want to have it over there, you can do it.
Thank you. Lucinda, I don't know what you mean about your question, so can you come off mute, please?
Don't worry, it was just when Laura was showing us something, my screen seemed to freeze, so I didn't see that last bit. The screen didn't move on to the scheduling bit, but it doesn't matter. It's fine.
Oh, sorry, did not move on. Hopefully it'll be in the recording, won't it?
Yeah. It will. If anyone has any questions, because there's no more in the chat box, if you've got any questions, come off mute. It'd be great.
Hashtags, how many?
Hashtags. They're kind of like a bit of a funny one with Pinterest. So hashtags, just for anyone who's not sure, so hashtags on Pinterest, you can use them. They work very much like what they do like on Twitter, in terms of what you'll see is there's no point in hashtagging anything that's what's the word I'm looking for. So you're going to see stuff with hashtags in order of when there was like shared. So if you look at a hashtag for something, you're going to see stuff that was shared that day. I don't know how many people genuinely use the hashtag search stuff on Pinterest. I don't think that's generally how people use it, but it could be a little boost to the SEO. But what it's not going to do is it's not going to make much difference to like stuff that's like scheduled further down the line, if that makes sense, because it's always going to show stuff in chronological order. But if you're not using, let's say you're not using Tailwind and you're just sharing stuff as and when, or you're just kind of scheduling stuff that to be quite close to when you're going to send it, then there's no harm in using a couple of hashtags.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Cool. Right, are we just about finished then?
Yes, we are.
Okay, so I've just scheduled a couple of things in Canva, so I'll report into the group and let you know how it goes. I've got one for this afternoon, one for tomorrow. So I'm just messing about with Canva to see if it works. I'll keep an eye out for those tomorrow. Laura, absolutely awesome session. What can I say? I mean, to get everybody to concentrate for 2 hours is exemplary. Well done. Right?
I haven't totally bamboozled everyone to death with all of that, because I know I can feel like quite a big thing to get through, but yeah, I mean, it is.
It's a huge shift for a lot of people to move to this as a sort of part of the proper strategy.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
It's not just a thing in its own right. You have to have the other stuff to put on there.
Yes.
You have to have the content to put on there. But I think if we've got this the challenge worksheet that you've got for us, that would be really cool. Suzanne, I'll drop it out to everybody that's been on the call this morning, and to anybody that watches on playback. I certainly would like a copy, because I'm going to have a go. And I think there's been a few of us mentioned numerous times that we're going to kick each other up the bottom and really try with Pinterest, and we're going to go into groups, or a little small group maybe. I think we can get that sorted out. We'll leave that with Suzanne. And I think for some of us who are doing the funded training next month, the marketing funded training, you might want to really think about this as your thing that you're going to do over a month in your funded training. So, we don't want to we've spent 2 hours with Laura and she's been absolutely awesome. We really want to put this to some good use. So let's just have a think about that. But Suzanne, you might be able to organise some of that stuff for us.
Yeah.
And thank you so much. Honestly, absolutely brilliant.
Oh, thank you. It's been lovely. I mean, I am like a genuine Pinterest passionate person. I've set up a personal account now for everything, but it is such a lovely platform to use. Like everything else, it's just kind of figuring out like how it fits your business. And I think in terms of like the scheduling and the using it, it is, building it into like the way that I've done it with I do use my VA. She's fantastic at it. So if it's something that you've got the capacity to outsource, it can be useful. But if not, it's just building it into like your regular marketing workflows.